All right, we're live. So thanks. Yes, thanks for joining here, Jacob. Long time no talk. How are things?
Yeah, it's good, man. Been a wild ride. I can't believe how long it's been since the salary.com days.
Yeah, so you've been a few places since salary.com, right?
Yeah, I've jumped around. I got more into e-commerce, kind of MarTech space, as
Hmm.
opposed to salary data. A little bit sexier, a
Yeah.
little bit more fun talking about. So yeah, I'm at a Swedish company called Bambuser now, and we're a video commerce platform.
Okay, interesting. And where did you go right after salary.com? Was that another like e-com company?
Yeah, it was kind of doing a European tour a bit. I was a French kind of chat company called
Okay.
iAdvise. I
Hmm.
was with them for about a year and then hopped over into this space because it was super interesting, a bit newer for ecom, but it's been fun so far.
So what does that product actually look like though? Like, how does someone use it?
Yeah, so essentially brands can host videos on their own site. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with kind of the live shopping wave that's been
I know
talked
like
about.
TikTok Shop is blowing up right now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically that, but on like the brand site.
Okay.
So we can make like video shoppable, interactive, so people can like learn about their customers, and it just removes a lot of the friction in the purchase process, so people can just buy products directly from the videos themselves on the sites.
Yeah, interesting. Definitely more interesting than I guess salary data, right?
Yeah, which I guess isn't too hard to do, to be honest. But
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it was a good, learning grounds for us, right? That was
oh yeah,
that was your first job out of college too, right?
yeah. First job as a BDR, grinding on the sales floor. So it was good. Definitely grateful for it.
Yeah, right. Like I look back and actually, I kind of thought it was like a no-name company. I mean, I'd never heard of them, but like, I was in college. I didn't hear of any like,
Yeah.
but I will say like they actually had really good training compared to what I've seen at other companies, like how they started us and like kind of like a 2-week boot camp.
Yeah, I always look back every now and then. I'm like, man, it felt when we were there, it was like, what the hell are we doing? But
Hmm.
almost like took it for granted because they did have a lot of good stuff going on. I think the structure there was pretty good, and it seems like they're doing like extremely well, especially in the industry
Yeah.
that they're in. So I'm definitely glad I started there. No regrets.
Yeah, and it's like a cool story because like Kent founded it, right? And then he sold it to I think it was IBM, right? And then bought it back, which
Yeah.
is always a cool story.
Yeah, no, it was good, and a lot of good people there. Like met you, I know I still talk to some of the other BDRs that we kind of grew up with, and I know like all of us kind of branched out a bit
Yeah.
from there. But it's
Yeah.
been good. It's grateful for it for sure.
100%. So how are things going these days? Is your quarter at the end of December?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good, man. I've been like ever since being like in the very transactional type of sales, I've
Hmm.
always been kind of trying to move more towards like larger deals, larger selling. I'm kind
Yeah.
of more I don't know, having to think through a bit more strategic about sales calls and building pitches,
Hmm.
which I'm in a good spot now. I get to talk to some really cool brands. So it's been good and it's been fun. I can have a little bit more fun with it, get a little bit more creative as well.
Yeah, and do you have BDRs under you like setting appointments and whatnot?
No, we're a
Okay.
strong team of three right now in the
Oh wow.
US. So yeah, very small and agile. So it's a little bit everything, a lot of prospecting, outreach on my own, and
Yeah.
then kind of handling the close, the full sales process beginning to end.
Interesting. And what does like a sales cycle look like that with like e-commerce? Because e-commerce can, I'm kind of in e-commerce myself, like different though, because like it's all on Amazon. But like what does a sales cycle look for that? Because it seems like they move pretty quickly. You kind of have to.
Yeah, it can go
So I'm
back
gonna
and
turn this on.
forth. It depends because we do deal with some coding on the site, and
Hmm.
companies are very particular with their site real estate and codes. And they have code freezes during the holiday season, of course, because they don't
I'm
want to break
sure.
anything on the site during all the sales and promos they got going on. So it can be a bit tricky with timing. If you get them right, it can be pretty quick, 2 to 3 months maybe. But I've dealt with some longer sales cycles with maybe 6 months, sometimes 12 months. If they do an evaluation early on, they'll disappear and then come back a year later and be like, all right, we're ready to go.
Interesting. And is it like on top of Shopify? Is that mainly what you guys go on top of, or something else?
Yeah, we can pretty much integrate with any platform. We're platform agnostic is my like
It's
line
a fancy
on the
word.
call.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big words here.
Yeah, but we work with Shopify. Salesforce Commerce Cloud is a big partnership for us
Hmm.
since we try and target more enterprise. accounts, but yeah, we can pretty much work with anyone.
Interesting. I actually interviewed for a job at the Commerce Cloud at Salesforce a long time
Oh,
ago.
nice.
After, I want to say it was after salary. Actually, it was after my job at Reflective, and they told me I wasn't cut out for enterprise, but maybe SMB. And I was like, okay, but like I was looking at it, and like when I talked to the BDRs there, they're like, look, it's going to be 2 to 3 years to get out of a BDR position into an AE role here, and it's like, ah. Once you're in
Yeah.
the BDR role for like 2 years and they tell you, yeah, it's going to be another like 2 to 3 years, I'm just like, no, I don't even want to like interview for the S&B one. Like, I'm good.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know because I went through a pretty intense interview process after salary.com and then from switching over from the company after that, and it was brutal out there for a bit, like just going through these conversations and hearing some of these stories. Again, going back to like taking salary.com for granted, where I feel like it was a pretty quick track for the most part when it came to like being a BDR, do your work, and then getting to jump up to a closing role at some point.
Yeah, I mean, they had it pretty structured, right? Like, obviously, there was still like a little bit of politics in there and whatnot, but like, actually, not as much as there are at other companies, I'd say, that I've
Yeah,
realized.
yeah.
But yeah, so maybe we should get into the sales news of the week. So essentially, we send out a bunch of news articles in the sales world for the follow up every week. And yeah, just want to like recap them because some of them are pretty interesting and basically do a rundown of them. So we sent one out on Tuesday and then we send one out on Thursday. Yesterday's newsletter I thought was pretty interesting. I got some good feedback from it, but like I went down the rabbit hole on Reddit and found this guy and whatnot, but we can get into that after. But Tuesday's newsletter. So the top stories we have here starting out is why a company's top sales rep who made 600K last year would quit their job this year. So not sure if you looked at that, but essentially like the top performing sales rep, right? Like the owner of the company is like, hey, this guy just made 600K last year and now he's going to leave. Like, what the heck? Which I can understand from a business person's perspective, like from a business owner's perspective. Like I just paid this guy so much money and then he left. But, it's because there's a reason he was a top sales rep, right? What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I got to read it before, and I really like how you like structure the follow-up. Super interesting articles and stories. Definitely
Appreciate
haven't heard
that.
of a lot of them either. It made sense. Like when you read the headline, you're like, yeah, there's no way. This is just like clickbait. But like
Hmm.
the reasoning behind it of the amount of change going from year to year, like there's no, having worked at like these small kind of European tech companies trying to make a name for themselves in the US, the amount of change that happens, like, okay, you're making 600K one year, but there's no guarantee that it's coming again the next year.
Yep.
Especially with the leadership changes, I think the biggest point was like the VP of sales instability there. Like that makes so much sense because the biggest difference, I mean, you and me know with kind of the managers we dealt with at
I was gonna
salary.com.
say that exact same thing, right? When you get a new guy in there, which we did, that was an
Yeah,
interesting time.
yeah, absolutely. So there's a big difference of outcomes when it comes to having a good VP of sales or a good
Hmm.
manager versus someone who's probably not your ideal style that you would prefer. So it makes a lot of sense if you're pulling in new VPs. We dealt with a couple of new VPs on the company right after salary.com that I worked for, and there's like they all come in, try and make their mark, and usually they're changing things just to say that they actually changed things. So I totally get it because again, yeah, you just made 600K, but if everything's different the next year, there's no guarantee that that money's coming back to you again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, obviously we had it on a much lower scale with BDRs, but yeah, 100%. Like if someone new comes in and you're just like, I wonder if there's also something to be said with like if you're the top rep, I wonder if in some cases you're expecting to be like if the VP of sales leaves, you're like, "Oh, like they're probably going to give that to me," which, I think everyone knows like a lot of the time like top reps obviously don't make the greatest sales managers. It is kind of like a different ball game. And a lot of the time actually though, like the best sales reps, they don't even want to become managers, right? Because it's like kind of a whole different schedules and like responsibilities and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think managers are almost their job is basically to give their time to everyone else, and the top reps are they're they got to be selfish, and just close what they can. So they don't really care about what's going on with anyone else. If you're making 600K closing deals, the best sales rep in the person on anything else but continuing to close deals, or a manager is
Exactly.
kind of the opposite.
Yeah, 100%. Well, this kind of like takes us into the next topic a little bit. Just that a new study found that young workers don't want to become managers because they favor their free time, which it does kind of make sense to me. And I mean, I could tell you just in my specific role in my like work history, when I was about, 6 months to a year in at Amazon, I had the conversation with my manager of basically like, hey, look, I'm not sure that I like, it seems like a lot of people are like, yeah, like I want to get into management so bad. But when I saw that like management and an IC role had the same exact pay and manager basically like was responsible for the entire team. And I was like, well, I could just be like a really good IC and make just as much, if not more, than the manager. Like that kind of sounds more intriguing to me. I know like long term, like management is kind of the key to like really getting up the ladder, right? Like you're not going to become a E of something usually without becoming, a manager somewhere along the road. But I understand it because it's like, why would I take on all this more responsibility if I'm getting paid around the same?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there's so much more added stress in the manager position too,
Hmm.
because you're the one responsible for reporting to kind of the higher ups. They're looking at those numbers a lot more. So there's just a lot more responsibility and stress just from what I've seen from my own managers of having to deal with all hours of the day too. Like you don't really have a 9 to 5 in the
Hmm.
manager role. And I see you can make your own hours, especially if you're a top contributor. But as a manager, like you essentially need to be always on at all times and available. So I can't, I can imagine that stress is not appealing to a lot of people that are making the same amount of money without any of that added stress.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people just like the idea of like, hey, I'm going to show up. I'm going to take care of what I'm responsible for. I'm going to do the best possible job at it. And, I expect to be compensated for it. Whereas like a lot of manager roles can be like, hey, you're going to be like kind of a therapist to the entire team. Like you're going to have to like motivate them. Like when stuff gets tough, you're going to have to like discipline them. It's like, oh, that's a lot,
Yeah, dealing with different personalities and some probably like you said, like almost becoming like a therapist
Yeah.
to a team, punching bag to the higher ups. So it's you're getting hit from both angles. Or I see you can just do what you want to do as long as you're contributing. You're good to go without much added
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
anything else.
And all of that, you know, saying all of that, like I still think it's super important to like understand manager skills. And like if you want to run a business one day, like you have to learn how to manage people and deal with all that, added, BS that comes along with a lot of it. But like there's no way around it, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm in the boat of like I'd definitely like to become a manager at some point. I think like dealing with people, it's like either like it or you don't. It just
Yeah.
if you want those responsibilities or not. So it's on my radar, but probably a bit further down.
Yeah. Want to crush it as an IC first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. So this last one we have from Tuesday's newsletter is the downsides of being the number one sales rep on the team, which like is pretty interesting because, it's like champagne problems. It's like, oh, you're the number one rep on the team. Like, what could possibly be bad about that? But like the first comment on here is like, hey, I was the top person on the team. I took a promotion to the sales manager and it cut my earnings in half the next year, right? Like that's exactly what we talked about. Where like no matter what, if you're the top rep, like you're usually seen as like could be a good sales manager one day, I think,
Yeah.
which is a part of it.
Yeah,
The
no, for sure. It's interesting because then you're almost getting a lot of those managerial responsibilities without becoming a manager too, because then they ask you to train all the new guys. People are coming to you for questions, so then all these other responsibilities that you're maybe not even getting compensated for start
Yeah.
to creep in.
Yep, no doubt. And I think the other ones were kind of like, hey, if you're a top sales rep every single quarter, every single month, right? If you have like a bad month or a bad quarter, everyone's just going to be like, what's going on? Like, he's lost it. Like, it's like being LeBron James, right? As soon as LeBron
Yeah.
James does something bad, everyone's like, I told you he wasn't that good. Maybe that's like a little too much, when we're comparing like the top sales rep to LeBron James. like same idea of like, hey, if you're always number one and then you kind of like slack off one time, you'll be called out for it. There was one comment in this Reddit thread that was basically like, the top 30% is like, or the middle 30% or 50% is like the good place to be, right? Like you're never like at the bottom, but you're never like number one, so you don't have like as much spotlight on you. I beg to differ. Like, I think you should always want to be number one, but I can understand where, like, if you just want to like have a good, steady job and kind of stick around, it's probably easiest to just stay like, upper quartile, but not number one.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, I mean, depending on where you are, how big your sales team is too, you're probably getting a lot of haters on the way up if you are number one. So there's probably a few more people rooting against you.
Yeah.
Similar to LeBron James, so not the worst analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Sweet. Anything else you want to cover from that one, or we'll move on to Thursday's send?
No, we can talk about Thursday.
So Thursday, I wanted to talk about the topic because I thought it was super interesting. Basically, I found this guy on Reddit probably about a month ago who his story is like, I was CEO of a company, I sold it for 7 figures, and now I'm like a remote 100% commission SDR. And, I make a ton of money doing it. And I'm like, oh, this is a sick story. And so I followed up with him in the Reddit, like, DMs for like a month straight. I'm like, dude, can I please tell your story? And finally he's like, you know what? Like, I've already given my name out and like the company, go ahead and run with it. And so I sent him these questions. He got back to me, and then I actually got on a phone call with him yesterday to run through some of it. But his story is pretty cool because it's like, he sold a business for 7 figures and he hustled to do the whole thing, right? Like it was almost like a vending machine business, but it was water
Yeah.
with companies. And he did the entire thing through just cold calling, right? Which is like, if you hustle hard enough, you could pretty much build a business out of nothing,
Yeah.
which I think is pretty sick.
No, I immediately thought of vending machines too. I was like, oh, this is just vending machines, but water coolers. And it's crazy because I feel like these stories pop up every now and then where someone just makes a stupid amount of money for just the most random thing in the world. I think there's one guy who built like a whole storage container company like off real estate who's like making millions now just because he bought up like unused storage containers and started renting them out.
Yeah.
But like people like this, it's just impressive because they can almost take anything like water coolers. I don't even know if we had a water cooler
Right.
at salary.com.
We had one of those fancy machines, remember?
Yeah. It's crazy. Like good for him for finding that. The 100% commission for me, I don't know. I think that would stress me out too much. If I had hair, I would be pulling it out with like dealing with that. But
the 100% commission is interesting. I mean, basically, like this guy could sell anything, which you think like, hey, what if you put this guy in like an enterprise sales role, which actually he probably wouldn't perform that well because I think he's more of like, hey, can I get a transaction today? Whereas like, enterprise is like, let's take 6 months to a year. However, it kind of shows like this guy could sell anything. Like the opportunity with water coolers was right in front of him and he found it, but it makes you think like, hey, that was probably like a C- opportunity. Like imagine if this guy was put in like an A+ opportunity, right? And yeah, what he's doing now is interesting. I mean, 300 to 400K a year is pretty insane for like just living fully off commission. But in my call with him yesterday, he's like, yeah, I probably go through 100 different opportunities to find like one or two that would make sense because most of the commission only stuff is complete crap. You have to find one that like has a sick product and they've sold a ton. So you're basically just being input there, right?
Yeah.
But
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what I thought too, is like, because I know there's a lot of 100% commission ones out there. Like grinding through sales jobs when you're looking for a new one it can be tough to figure out what's good and what's probably not worth anyone's time because there are so many out there. So I mean, good for him for finding what works. But like you said, like if it sounds like he's the type of guy who could just make something out of nothing, really, like turning water coolers and selling them. What was it, 7 figures exit? Like, I mean, that's impossible to knock. That's just impressive.
It's super impressive. Yeah, I think like you mentioned with a lot of those roles, a lot of them are like companies that can't afford to bring in a full-time sales rep and they're like, hey, we're not getting any sales. Let's just offer people like a really big commission to go like fix our sales problem, which that's the issue, right? Like if they're already selling a lot, they just need more sales reps. That's the position that you want, right? Not one where they're like, hey, we have a big sales problem and you can be entrepreneurial and figure it out for us. And it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Okay, this next one, John Paul DeJory, who's the founder of John Mitchell, sorry, Paul Mitchell Shampoo. He's also a co-founder of Patron. He says the most important thing to becoming successful is mastering rejection. You agree with that?
I know we both dealt with it quite a bit in
Yeah.
our BDR days, and I think the biggest like shift for me coming out of college and like, oh man, I need to make like 75 to 100 calls a day, send 75 to 100 emails. Some people get mad. They get
Hmm.
real mad and they take time out of their day to show you how mad they are.
Yeah. Oh
Like I
yeah.
think we probably both got like lawsuits threatened with like citing some random act from these people, and I remember like just turn around and like so you just start laughing with
Yeah.
with like your friends and your desk mates after the fact, and like I think I forget what the other one's called, but the growth mindset, like learning about that in my BDR days of like everything's an opportunity, every rejection, like you can just learn from it and control what you can. Like there's
Hmm.
always opportunity to be better. Like that was such a big mindset shift for me, and I feel like it made dealing with those rejections, whether it was through email or even on cold calls, like just so much easier because then you just move on and it's like, all right, well that didn't work. Let me try something new and figure out what will work. So maybe I'm
Yeah.
not getting rejected as badly, but I feel like a lot of the times those rejections, especially the ones with the where you can feel the anger, that's more of a
Hmm.
it's more of a them issue for sure as opposed to anything that you did anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And like I'm helping someone out with like their some cold outreach campaigns right now. And we'll get 10 responses per day basically like stop, take me off your list, blah blah blah. And it's like I don't think he's used to it as much, but I'm just like, I mean, we got to get through 50 of these till we get our first yes, right? We get our first yes, right? But it's like those first 20, like you just have to hit those and get those out of the way. It's all a numbers game, and that's how I see it. The only thing with like cold calling that always kind of hurt is like when you get off a call and you're like, ah, shit, like if I would have said this, would I have gotten the meeting, right? That's the only thing that's
Yeah.
tough. Rejection is like, nah, it
Yeah,
isn't.
for sure. But I mean, it's a good place to be to get used to it, especially if you're doing the volume, just smiling and dialing.
Mhm.
You have to. Like there's no way to avoid the no's at all. So
Yeah.
you might as well get comfortable with them.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, just like us, right? Like anytime you get a cold call or anything like that, it's like, dude, I don't need it. I'll just tell you no, right?
Yeah.
You just gotta put yourself in those shoes. This one's kind of funny. This next one we have is a sales manager accidentally sent a rejection letter to one of his reps who'd already been selling in the role for a month. It's not like a B2B role. I think he's actually like a department store clothing like sales rep, but I just thought that was funny. It's like can you imagine like a month into your job you just get that rejection letter that we've all gotten from a job, right? Like sorry, we consider you but we decided to go forward with other candidates. They always hurt.
Yeah, for sure. It made a lot of sense when I saw it was like for the Gap outlets because I was like
Yeah, yeah.
I worked at Banana Republic part time just in college trying to make some money, and I mean the amount of turnover there is crazy with managers and salespeople. So it's hilarious that I mean a little scary and I guess makes you a bit more grateful for any systems you have in place at your own company where you
Hmm.
probably wouldn't have that mistake be made at Amazon or anything like that. But just a probably funny story. I definitely wouldn't want to be the one on the other end of that email, even if I had been working there for a month. Like, man, that's just an ego hit. Like, we we
Yeah.
got a coffee the other day, you know?
Yeah, that reminds me. You just mentioned like when I was in high school, I went to a job fair and like Abercrombie and Fitch was there, like those stores in the mall. And they invited me for an interview at the store. And I remember I showed up and they were like, they asked me some question about like if there was two customers fighting and they wouldn't leave the store and like they were screaming and yelling, like what would you do? And I didn't know. I was just like, well, I'd probably like ask them to leave and like tell them to get out of the store. And like I guess that wasn't the right answer. I should have like, asked the manager and tried to like not deal with it myself. But I got denied from Abercrombie and Fitch. I did not get the job. It's a bummer.
Oh, those interviews are a little bit crazy. They have some wild policies in retail in general, which is kind of crazy to see. Yeah, with like you can't really acknowledge any shoplifters. Like if you see someone throwing clothes into a bag, you basically just gotta look the other way, like tell a manager but not say anything. So
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, I see all those videos on Twitter all the time of just like some employees try to stop them. And like when I watch those videos, I'm like, I think I would try to stop them too. Like that kind of stuff
Yeah.
pisses me off. Uh, but at the same time, it's like, you're dealing with that type of person. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, well, some of those videos are crazy now with people like running out of the store with like 4 bags on their shoulders.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's wild. Retail is a interesting place. You'll definitely learn a lot. Build some grit for sure.
Yeah. Build some character for sure. This next topic, do you use HubSpot in your current role?
Yeah, this is my first company using HubSpot. I was a Salesforce guy before. We
Mm.
have HubSpot now. It's super interesting. Saw a lot of AI was thrown in there as well
Yeah.
for some buzzword, but I'm not too familiar with Clearbit.
I think Clearbit is like, premium data. Like I think it has more of like just like way deeper info than just like emails and phone numbers and stuff. Like more intent data, which I know there's a lot of some people say like intent data is just complete BS. But I think there's a lot of like that and like company history and like much more rich data than just like strictly emails and phone numbers. I could be off on that, but I think that's what it is. But yeah, I think that's an interesting acquisition, right? Because it's like they'll just integrate the data right in, which is actually what we're kind of seeing with. Have you been following this Apollo and Zoom Info beef at all on LinkedIn?
No, we got rid of Zoom Info. We were using Apollo for a bit, but we don't use either of them now, to be honest. Yeah.
What do you use now?
We're using Lead IQ, which
Okay.
has been pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many out there. I think that Zoom Info does still have the best data, but they are the most expensive out of any of them.
Yeah.
I think Apollo's good, but it's like super cheap, so everyone kind of has it. And so like everyone kind of has the same data, so you don't really have any alpha there, but it is what it is. But yeah, I think this is interesting because Apollo kind of built like a CRM outreach tool within their tool with the data. So yeah, I think this is just going in that trend that like you're going to get your data as a part of like your overall CRM purchase, which is interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, what I immediately thought when I saw like that intent data stuff, I was like, are they going after like sales nav too? Like they're taking on sales and like LinkedIn at the same time? Because I think these companies like HubSpot, like you probably hear all the time, like, oh, we want to be sticky, and everyone's trying to build like an all-in-one type platform. So, I mean, it seems like HubSpot's going that way too. So it's super interesting to see like who they're going to compete against with this additional, because I know SalesNav has been adding quite a bit. They have intent data. How real that is, I have yet
Yeah,
to
who
know
knows? It sounds
and
good though.
figure out. Yeah, I mean, I like the notifications. Oh, someone's been researching your company. Like, oh, that's cool. It makes me feel a bit better. My emails
Yeah.
aren't just going into the abyss all the time, which is nice. But yeah, it's just a race to become the all-in-one platform. So it'll be interesting because it seems like HubSpot has consistently been making ground against Salesforce. I
Hmm.
just don't see Salesforce, I mean, taking too many hits anytime soon. They're just massive.
They are. And yeah, to your point, like every company I've ever been at is Salesforce, right? They just like I haven't tried every other one out there, but I think that they obviously offer like the most or the best possible CRM out there. It's it doesn't make sense if you're like a small company though, because it's first off, it's super expensive and there's so many
Yeah.
customizations that like, when we were at salary.com, we had people that literally their entire job is just to work Salesforce, right? Which is like kind of insane. You have to buy a software and then hire someone just to like work it, which is kind of crazy.
I always think about that, how crazy it was that we had like a director of just Salesforce making sure like all that was.
Ye-
Yeah, he even had a guy on his team. Like we had 2 or 3 guys working
Yeah.
Salesforce just making sure that it was in top form, which I mean made sense because I do think again they had like a surprisingly good setup that I took for granted with just managing the CRM and how useful it was in the day to day and not wasting too much time. But
Yeah.
it's incredible, and I like the Dreamforce. I don't know if you're like familiar with the Dreamforce
Hmm.
conference that they have every
It's
year, but
nuts.
it's like what 40,000 people just going to one city at the
Hmm.
same time. It's absolutely insane. Like that's bigger than like a lot of towns in the U.S. Like they're gonna have their own economy soon if
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
go.
absolutely. I mean, they made like an entire movement, right? Like, yeah, the fact that people will buy this insanely expensive software that basically their entire company runs on, at least marketing and sales, and then they have to hire people just to like take care of that. Like not even just like a normal IT person, but like strictly a Salesforce admin person. And by the way, those people are like very expensive, right? Like 150, 200, 250 is like a normal salary for them. So it's like to think that like the software itself probably costs that, and then another person, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, that's why it's a sticky product, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, super impressive. Like they have companies just built on being making Salesforce easier to use itself. So it's
Mhm.
great. It's crazy to see.
Yeah. But to that same note, like HubSpot has that too, right? Like there's a bunch of HubSpot implementation companies or like consulting firms, which is pretty cool when you can make a product and, you know, there's 50 other companies built just off of implementing it and learning how to use it. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, they're doing a good job. It'll be interesting to see where they are in a year or two because it seems like they're only getting bigger and better.
Yep. Okay. Last one we got here is a story of a sales manager hiring a convicted murderer. So essentially, what happened is this guy was the interim sales manager for a B2B digital ads company. And why he was the interim, he had to hire some new sales reps, right? And he came across this guy that seemed like a, I'm going to use so many puns in this, but seemed like an absolute killer, right? He was a killer on the phones. He'd absolutely, murder the leads. But anyway, this guy like came across as like, hey, this guy could definitely do the job. He'd be really good at it. Turns out, he spent 20 years in prison for killing a guy. And the sales manager didn't immediately say like, no, we can't hire this guy. Instead, he kind of like covered up the fact that this guy had a felony conviction and murdered someone. And later when his boss found out, he was like, look, yeah, I did know. I didn't tell you because if I did tell you, you probably wouldn't have let me hire him. But he's the number one sales rep on the team, just like I knew he was going to. And the whole story of him murdering someone was that he got pissed off at his mom's boyfriend, and so he killed the boyfriend. And I mean, the mic drop moment of this whole thing is the sales manager goes, well, the good news is his mom's dead, so there can't be any more boyfriends to kill, right?
Yeah.
Would you hire a convicted felon like that or a murderer?
I mean, this guy must have been one of the best talkers he'd ever met because if he was willing to just say, I won't tell anyone, like, I think this guy's got it, and like go through all that, and then he became the number one sales rep, like, he must be the most charismatic, like, hilarious guy that has walked into this room.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of get it. It's hard to argue that any one specific background is
Yeah.
good for sales. If you're good at talking and you can convince someone to hide the fact that you murdered someone and go to bat for you like that quickly, I mean, all power to you. Like you earned it. You earned the job for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, one thing I would say is like if you've spent 20 years in prison, like the amount of like people you have met and rejection you've dealt with and like hardship and whatnot, like getting on the phone and cold calling someone to say like, hey, do you want to buy this? Is probably a walk in the park, right? As opposed to like, a college student that went to like a good school and like came out like, they've had 20 years in their life to face rejection, right? Like a total. Yeah, I'm sure this guy is just like, yeah, whatever, I'll do whatever. Did you watch the telemarketers documentary on HBO yet?
No, I haven't.
It's so good. It reminded me of this because they only hired felons because they were so good at cold calling and they'd pay them $10 an hour, no commission. But if they didn't hit their numbers, they were gone. And like the felons were like $10 an hour at the time. They were like, I'll do whatever I have to stay in this job. You should check it out.
Yeah, I mean, talk about building character. Like I can't think of a better way to learn rejection kind of prison, like no personal experience, but I mean, like you said, yeah, it has to be a walk in the park because just calling some random guy, they tell you no, like that's nothing. You're forgetting about that maybe after 2 seconds and moving
Yeah.
on. So
Yeah.
such a funny story.
Such a good story, right? Like, yeah, I just love finding these Reddit stories. But yeah, anyway, well, that's the last story that I have here. So are you in Charlotte, North Carolina now, I see?
Yeah, I moved down from Boston, needed a little change of scenery. Said, screw it, I'm just gonna pack up my things, signed a lease online, drove down here,
When
see
did
what
you
it's all
move?
about. A little over a year and a half ago, I think like April, May of 22.
Dude, you got to come visit me. I'm in Wilmington, right?
You're okay. It's North Carolina?
Yeah, three and a
Or
half hours.
oh, okay. Yeah, dude, let's link up. Yeah,
If
I'm
you
just a
come,
short drive.
yeah, if you drive straight out to the ocean, basically, that's where I am here in
Oh, okay.
Wilmington. Yeah, dude, you
Oh,
gotta come
awesome.
visit. Come
How long have you
surf.
been?
3.5 years now. Or
Okay.
wait, no, just 3 years. Sorry, we moved down in 2020. Basically, like, I was living in Boston at the time. Everything went remote, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to pay like whatever I'm paying, like 950, which was actually super cheap to live in Boston. It was like,
Yeah.
live in a shoebox, and it's like, I hate living in the city. It's a lot better down here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, man, we'll have to link up. I'll shoot you a note and we can figure something out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for coming on here, man. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, dude. It's good talking to you. And we'll be in touch for sure.
Yeah, sweet. All right, I'll wrap it right
Awesome.
there.